Hi. So I want you to think about something. So say you're taking your child to college for the first time, which I'll be doing this year, and you are dropping them off and you're bringing their stuff in, you're helping them unpack, and it comes time to say goodbye, and you have to give a big hug, and you need to walk out the door, and you need to leave and get in your car and drive away. What are you hoping and praying that your child has? What skills do you want your child to have when you're leaving them at college for that first time? What do you think is most important? What do they need? Think about it. Now, let's think about your best memory as a child. Think for a moment something that comes right to mind for you when you were a child, something that's a really great memory. Think for a second. I'm going to give you some time. Now, in your mind, think about what was happening. Where were you? What were you doing? Were you free to play? Were you outside? Were you comfortable? What do you think made up that great memory and what made it so great?
Space and design. Where's your favorite place to be? Think about where that might be and why that's your favorite place. I'll give you a minute. Think about department stores, food stores, parties. When you enter a space, what about that place would make you feel comfortable? What about that place would make you feel overwhelmed? When you go shopping or you go looking for things, what do you need the place to be organized like for you to feel less frustrated and less overwhelmed? In the schools of Reggio Emilia, the space design is not an afterthought. It is the entire basis of the program. You cannot have a space that's not designed in a specific way and then still have a Reggio program. The environments need to be comfortable, include lots of elements of nature, some either natural light or warm light, comfortable spots, places for individual children to be on their own and in small groups and in large groups. There's so many different things about a space that would make someone feel comfortable or uncomfortable. And if you're not comfortable, you will not learn the same way that you would as if you were comfortable. Think about sitting in a conference room during a presentation and the chairs are uncomfortable, or it's too cold in there, or you're hungry. Where is your mind? Your mind is always, always, always at your basic need. So we have to make sure that their basic needs are not just fulfilled, but that we make sure that they are comfortable and the setup is there for them for setting up for success. The next couple of slides, I included some inviting spaces, some images of inviting spaces. So please review the next couple of slides, and then please send me a document, a Word document, or even in the, you can put in the comment section in Google Classroom. You can share a conversation with each other. What about these designs speak to you? What about them bother you? What about them do you like? Do they give you any inspiration for your own space? Is there anything similar in your space of the pictures that you're going to see? And I also want you to do some searching on your own and then journal about it in your chapter review of images that maybe you really spoke to you. You can do Google image searches. I would recommend you do Reggio Emilia spaces because their spaces are beautiful. And you can do it in Pinterest, you can do it on Google. Look around the internet a little bit at some of these space designs and get some ideas of some other thoughts, some other ideas and ways that you could set up your classroom so that children would feel at home and comfortable and calm, and that it was organized for them in a way that allowed them to be successful. Okay, next. Looking at this space, What do you like about it? What makes you feel comfortable? What don't you like about it? What do you think could be different? What do you think is missing? Do you think anything's missing? Does this feel homey or comfortable? Does this add, is this a place for good conversation? But what if a child wants to be by themselves? Or what if you need small groups? Does this lead to that? Thinking about all the things that we just mentioned, how does this classroom speak to you? Now look at this classroom. Very, very different. Actually, pretty much the opposite. Probably for younger children, true. But even forgetting about that, since furniture can always be adjusted, think about the feeling of this space versus the feeling of the space that you just saw before. What elements are different? What could you pull from this even to put into a classroom with older children? Do you feel like this is a comfortable space or not, and why? Again, this is an early childhood setting, so your materials and your furniture would be different, but what about this classroom is different overall? What elements of this room could be used with children in older settings that can make their space comfortable? What do you feel like when you look? Think about the elements of space. Looking back on the classrooms that we just saw, and maybe some of the classrooms that you've already researched, here are some elements to think about putting into the space. Elements from nature. Think about earth, wood, metal, fire, water, all different things that you can put in a space that are interesting to children and inherently calming. Nature has been proven to be inherently calming. So do you have elements of nature in your space? Thinking about color, but not color from commercial items, color from natural items, from the authentic materials, flowers, leaves, photographs of things from the outside, sky, your windows, your plants. What elements of color can you find? Artifacts from different cultures, instruments, fabric, things like that that could bring in those color, but from the natural world. Thinking about defining your spaces, as we spoke before, rather than setting up your furniture for one type of group or one type of interaction, how do you set it up so that you can have several different types of groups, and also that's differentiating for children who need different setups to learn best. Textures and shape. In many classrooms and in many homes even, the toys, materials, games, many things are plastic. And that means that when you are feeling them as a child, there's one texture. There may be different colors, but plastic has one texture. How do you add different textures into your space? Baskets, wood, fabric, all the different types of textures, your baskets, your bins. That's why the rage has been to use real baskets, because it has more texture than plastic. And the more things you touch and explore, the more that your brain has to learn something new and acclimate to a new sense. So the more interesting textures and shapes, the better. Thinking about walls, images, artwork versus store-bought. Think about a house versus a hotel. In your home, what do you have? Things that reflect you, things that mean something to you, things that you have personally chosen, photographs of family members, artwork from family members, gifts that people bought you. You know, it feels very homey when you walk in someone's house and you see all their family photos or their vacation photos or a vase of flowers, things that really just speak to that person specifically and tell you something about them. When you go to a hotel, it's very generic. Purchase things just to fill the space, not personal. Think about your classroom. How many things have been purchased but are not personal in terms of the children that are in your classroom that year? The same posters, the same signs, the same calendar, all of those things are the same, but they don't reflect the children in the classroom that year. Think about removing those and using photographs and artwork as your main design, your main choice for design. Honor children's work rather than, just sticking things up with a push pin. Think about framing and putting them up in a way you would see in a museum. You're not going to see artwork from a famous artist just popped up on the wall or taped up on the wall. You're going to see it framed. You're going to see a note next to it saying what it is and what it means, thinking about honoring them. and the ambiance in the room, lighting, shadow, transparency, windows, glass. Think about your lighting. Is it all fluorescent? Is there any time where you turn the lights down and you put lamps on? Do you use transparency, like cellophane, so that you change the color feeling of the room or of a space or just of an experience at a table? Thinking about windows, all different shadows, using those things for learning experiences, shadows, light tables, when I can't think of the word, when there's a reflection from a window or from a prism, all those different things, using the lighting in the room to enhance learning. Here are some questions just to think about. You can read this slide, and when you go to write your journal entry, is something for you to consider adding to your entry. I am very aware that there are a lot of roadblocks, that these classroom environments don't just belong to you. Many of you have told me that after school you have religious classes in your classroom. So there's a lot of roadblocks. I'm aware of that, but there are a lot of things that you can do. Adding plants to a space is not something that's going to be detrimental to another classroom, another group of children using it later. Thinking about all the roadblocks, but how can you get around them? And that is definitely something that you can post in the chat box. Roadblocks are a great conversation to share with each other. How do you transform a space? How do you bring in all these elements into a classroom in a place where they've never been before? It's going to be shocking for some people, but it's absolutely worth it. So how do we get around these roadblocks? And I'm happy to talk to you more about this, and I'm happy for you to share your roadblocks on the comment boxes, and either myself or others can work with you to help come up with some new ideas. You can also post images of the classrooms that you have found that you really like to share with others, or elements of the in the slide that I showed you before of nature and all the different things that we talked about. You be pleased. I would love for you to share some of these images that you find online in the comments box for all to see.
Take some time to think about what can you do? What can you do in your space to enhance the feeling of attachment and belonging? Just take a little time. When do we have time to actually just sit and think? Take a piece of paper, write down some ideas based on the book, based on some of the slides, and think about an action plan that might help you move forward in this area. You don't have to turn it in. This is all for you.
We often think about routines in the classroom as separate from the curriculum. Washing hands, setting tables, cleaning up, putting your stuff away, hanging up your backpack, cleaning up toys, everything that they do in the regular day around their academic work. So if we think about that differently and thinking about all the times of the day and routines, there's a lot of power in using routines to enhance attachment to the environment, as well as enhancing academic skills. When you are working with children, washing hands, when you are with young children and you're in the bathroom or changing diapers, how you interact with them, the conversations you have one-to-one time during a lot of these routines because children often need help. So maximizing the one-to-one time so that you're not frustrated and rushed and trying just to get things done, but using that as a time to connect with children on an individual level. The chapter 2 is about attachment. That means that as individuals, children are attaching to other individuals. This is not about the whole group. This is about person to person. This whole chapter is about person to person. So thinking about ways that you can get that personal time with children, helping them through the routines. And also thinking about it from the academic standpoint. You're counting out napkins, you're getting math skills in, you're hanging up backpacks, you're doing fine motor, you're learning executive functioning skills, you're learning self-regulation by doing all these tasks on your own. So not only do they help with attachment, but they also help to enhance the curriculum. This is a very important concept. This is using your powers for good. As adults, we have a lot of power over children in a classroom. They look at us for security and safety, and they, for the most part, want us to be happy and want to please us. And we really have a lot of power, possibility for power. So how we use those powers are really important in encouraging attachment. Without attachment, children are not going to be able to grow and learn as successfully as if they are attached. The research shows that with children have to have healthy attachments to adults to be successful, period, from infancy on. So how do we help them attach to us? We need to make them feel comfortable and safe with us. And so how we use our powers has a lot to do with that. So here's a way to think about it. There's power on, power for, and power with. Power on means you're in charge, you're teacher directed, you're giving rules, you're giving out information, they have to follow your directions, they need to go to the bathroom, they need to wash their hands. All power on. If a child's running away and you need to tell them to come back, that's power on because you're afraid of their safety. Power for is working with children while they're a part of the process, but you're still leading it. So in this image, you see they're cooking together. You're still a big part of that because you're leading the experience for it to work out, but the child has a lot of hands-on opportunities along with you. They're alongside of you while you're doing it. You can give them directions, but you can help them participate. When you are in a group experience, you have choices to be power on or power for. If your power is on, then you're basically just directing the whole process. If your power is for, then the children are very involved. So they're moving, they're sharing information, they're asking questions, they're making decisions on what's going to happen next. That would be a power for experience. Power with is real exploration, real true exploration. The environment is set up and safe, and they have the freedom to move about, and they do not need an adult right on top of them, that they can explore and learn. And research shows that the absolute most effective way to learn is with your power with. So thinking about your classroom and how much time each day you spend with your power on versus your power for versus your power with. Power with should be a large chunk of your day. Actually, the guidelines are 2/3 of your day in a classroom should be for either open play, exploration, children solving problems on their own. So thinking about how much time you spend giving directions and being in charge and in the front versus how much time children are either in small groups, working together, exploring freely, that's the time they're going to learn the most. Your instruction is necessary for them to learn the initial skill, but then time on their own is really important because they're not going to really learn or understand unless they're discovering on their own. So the concept of power is very important. What attachment doesn't look like? This is really, really important. When a child is not attached to you, when a child is not bonded to you in a healthy way, and sometimes it just means that they're shy or they're quiet and they need a little bit more work with you. It doesn't mean you're doing anything intentionally wrong. It's just something to pay attention to. So let's go through these really fast. Embarrassment. Embarrassment is not always the obvious. Sometimes the basic embarrassment would be yelling at a child across the room or reprimanding a child in front of others. That's very embarrassing. So the minute a child is embarrassed, their brain shuts down and they hear nothing else that you say. So if you have an issue with a child, if you walk across the room, touch their shoulder, kneel down next to them, quietly interact with them, pull them to the side, you will have much more possibility that the child will learn from that mistake than if they are embarrassed. Because like I said, the minute they're embarrassed, they hear nothing else that you've said and they're not processing what you're asking them or telling them to do or not to do. Another form of embarrassment sometimes is praise. Some children do not like to be praised in front of others. They do not like their attention to be on them. So think about those different types of children and which children like to be recognized and which children do not. And always, always handle your behavioral challenges in private. It's respectful and provides dignity for those children, and again, will reinforce an attachment. Fear, scared of you, that goes along with embarrassment. If they're scared, they feel unsafe, even if it's not physically and it's emotionally, the attachment is not going to be there. It's not going to be healthy. Feeling ashamed, feeling inadequate, all connected, unresponsive to adults. Very, very important to think about. I have seen so many times a teacher saying to me, this child doesn't listen to me. This child doesn't respect me. He ignores me. In most cases, if you take some steps backwards and try to figure out what type of relationship you have with that child, that's where the problem is. So when you have a situation like that, and again, you could be the sweetest, kindest person, but if that child does not feel like you understand them or respect them or are trying to get to know them, they are going to go the opposite direction. So the first place to start when you have a child like that, who's oppositional, is to build a relationship with them and work really hard. Rules without relationships equals rebelliousness. Very important to remember. Rules without relationships equals rebelliousness, probably 99% of the time. They ignore your requests. You ask them to do things, they ignore it. Sometimes you think they're ignoring you to be disrespectful, but really they have a fear of doing something, or they're ashamed, or they're embarrassed, and so they're just ignoring you, or they don't really understand the direction and they're too embarrassed to say, things like that. Always err on the side of giving the child the benefit of the doubt and figuring out how they feel in those situations. Most of the time, children are not doing things to manipulate you on purpose, unless they're trying to get your attention, which means that they need your attention. So you can just ignore that and then make an effort to give them more positive attention, because it's still a sign that they need you. Show no emotional response to adult displeasure. So many times we've seen, or a child smiles at you, or they don't react to you. That is a sign of their lack of attachment. So again, taking steps back, you're planning in as much individual time as possible while you're doing routines with children. You are planning to do something special with that child, like it's their job to do something with you every day, to stack papers or to hand things out or to clean up a space or to clean up the dry erase board, thinking about ways to build that bond with that child. And too friendly with those who are not caregivers, that's also a sign of lack of attachment. You've seen those children who climb all over somebody they don't even know, or they talk to everybody. It's okay to be friendly, but there is a difference between a child who has no initial hesitation with someone new, and really the attachment is not healthy because it's too far the other direction. So it's something to notice, something to think about. Sometimes it has nothing to do with you, and it means there's an attachment issue maybe somewhere else, like at home or something, and that they are craving the additional time with you or the additional attention, and if you give it to them, they will get their needs met, even if they're not getting them met at home. So it is really a wonderful thing for us to give this to these children that really need it.
I think this is a very important point. Oftentimes in classrooms, when I say things to teachers like, maybe that child should sit on your lap, or maybe that child should be the child who every day changes the schedule, or maybe the schedule pictures, or maybe that child needs to hold something like a heavy toy or a fidget. And the teacher will say to me, yeah, but then everybody's going to want one. And I think that that is a really, really important point to think about. Number one, fair is getting what you need when you need it, right? So that's something wonderful to teach children. It's not always what they need. Other children sometimes need something more than they do, or something different than they do. And I think that that is a huge life important lesson we can give children. Sometimes it's not for them, sometimes it's for the person next to them, and that they should value that other children have needs, and other children are going to get your attention, or they're going to get to hold something because it's what they need at that moment. It's really important to get away from the everybody needs to have one mentality and really start working with children on why that's not the case, because that's really not what life is all about. And it's a hard lesson for children, but for them to understand that, you know what, my friend really needs to sit next to me right now. So that's what we're going to do, what he needs right now. And another time you're going to need something different, and then we're going to be here for you, is a really, really great message for children. So start rethinking that idea of you can't do it because everybody else will want it. And start to learn. At the beginning, they're all going to do that. They're all going to say, but I want it, but I want it. That's not fair. That's not fair. And that's where the teaching begins. And as you start to lay that foundation in your classroom, it will be a non-issue. They'll understand, and their empathy and compassion will grow. I know this sounds like a simple concept, and it's really feels like maybe it's not so important. But in my opinion, I think it really is when you're helping children feel like they're a part of something, or that with their thoughts and their ideas matter. Oftentimes, when you go out with children, probably a lot of the time, all the way through elementary school, children like to find things outside or find things in the building and collect them. They find little gems, they find little rocks. I mean, they're always looking to find things that are special that they think is something they want to take home or show their families. And they'll often run up to you and say, "Look what I found! Look what I found!" And it's just like a normal part of our day. It's really interesting to think about because these are children are trying to share, and they're trying to show you what their interests are and share with other children. And it's such a small thing, but could go a really long way to have a collection center in your classroom. Maybe one of those over the door shoe hangers where they have all the children have their name and they can put their things they find in their little sleeve on the door, or in maybe drawers that you can find little plastic drawers and they have their names and they can open their drawers and put their things they find in there. I think it's really important to really value what it is that they think is important. I think about that with teenagers. I have two teenagers, and oftentimes they want to share with me music or a TikTok video or something that I don't find as interesting as they do. But the bonding is where you validate their interest instead of saying that's ridiculous or I'm not interested in that. Just even if you're not really, just really saying, wow, that's fascinating. Why are you interested? What about that is interesting? Tell me about it. Just connecting with them on their music, on their art, on the stories about friends is really what bonds you with older children. And the same thing with young children. Really connecting to them and not discrediting what they are interested in because you're not interested in it. So collections is just a small thing and a small point, but I think it's very valuable in a classroom to have a collection station or an area for them to keep their things safe and respected.
The way you talk to children becomes their inner voice. We know from research that the inner voice, that is your conscience, that gives you messages, that tells you how smart you are, how pretty you are, how fat you look, and all the things that we think about ourselves all the time, that inner voice is not formulated until children are close to 5 years old. Research shows that the messages delivered, even without being verbal, those messages that we give to children become that inner voice. I know that's pretty scary, isn't it? So the way that we handle them, the way that we show respect to children, the way that we show that they're valued and they're not just an annoyance to us all the time, the messages that we send verbally and non-verbally to children becomes that inner voice eventually. So think about that when you are talking with them, the way you speak with them, the way you respond when they need your attention. I'm not saying that they need to get your attention every minute of the day, but in responding to a child in a way where you say, hold on 1 minute, I just need to finish what I'm doing and then I will be there to listen to you. And then when you get there, you get down and you are face to face or sit with them or show them that it's important what they have to say. When you don't, yell across a room and you walk up to a child and pull them aside quietly away from their peers so that they're not embarrassed, all those little things that we do are sending messages to children about their value. And those messages will eventually become their inner voice. So we have a lot of power to help children to grow and to learn. Now, we're not the only one who's providing the voice. It's also coming from home. It's coming from other people, other children. That's just fine. That's part of life. But being that person in the classroom that is sending them that message, someone that they look up so much to, sending them a message of their value and how respected they are, is going to play a large role in creating that inside voice. And when I say inside voice, you know that I'm not talking about the inside outside voice.
What do you do when you're getting a new child and you have a current class of children and there's a new child coming? How do you prepare the children in your class to welcome that child? What can you do in advance? Could you FaceTime? Could you write a letter? Could you email the child? Could you, with the students, could you send a video? Could you send a gift? Could you get some background about the child and share it with your current children? What do you do to prepare children so that when the new child comes, they really recognize the importance of welcoming somebody new? Again, as I said before with the collections, it's not just important for the child coming to feel welcome. It's also important for the children in your class to learn how important it is to welcome somebody and show respect and help someone feel comfortable in a new space. This is a whole class all in itself, but we're going to just start off with talking about challenging behaviors. The most important thing to know about a challenging behavior is number one, every single behavior is happening for a reason. And number two, you're not going to get anywhere if you don't have a relationship with that child. Rules without relationships equals rebelliousness. You have to have a connection with children. That's your work at the beginning of the year. Because unless that's there, you're not going to get anywhere with challenging behaviors. They have to respect you. They have to want to work with you. They have to trust you. Otherwise, nothing you do is going to work, period, the end. But number two, as I said before, every behavior happens for a reason. What is the reason? The behavior itself is just a symptom. Whether they scratch, kick, bite, hit, curse, scream, throw furniture, all those things are the same. They're all happening for a different reason that's underneath it. So the reactions usually from the adults are bigger based on what the occurrence is. So yes, if someone really gets hurt, you're going to have that angry feeling towards that child because they really hurt somebody, or they threw something and scared people, or they ran away and scared you, and you couldn't find all those things that make your emotions run wild. Yes, you have to manage it. Yes, you have to. There has to be a consequence, but you have to remember every single one of those different children have different temperaments. So the same child who might feel left out might sit in a corner and cry, while another child who just feels left out flips over a chair. The underlying behavior is what matters. So don't put all your energy into what they did. Put it into why they are doing it. That's really important to remember. I've had teachers say to me, well, he scratches and he needs to get his nails cut, and that's all they're thinking about and focusing on. And my question is, why are they doing that? Let's observe. Let's watch what happens before that goes on. What time of day is it? Are we keeping track of that? Do we know that this is happening all at the same time? It doesn't matter what the behavior is. It matters why. So something to think about.
So this is a story that I always like to tell because I think it really, even though it's a simple story, tells a very big message, and it's something that's always stuck with me and is something that comes to mind often during challenging situations. So I thought I would share it. So there were these three little boys on the playground. They were 2 going on 3 years old, end of 2s. And the one little boy was very, very, very shy. And he just really didn't speak with other children, didn't play with other children, cried a lot. It was obvious that he was trying to make friends, but just wasn't able to, to get to that place. So one day he is outside in the playground, and there's a tunnel on the playground, and all of a sudden the teacher hears crying and screaming, and she goes over there and she sees that somebody's throwing rocks outside from inside the tunnel at one of the other little boys that was on the outside of the tunnel. So she looks inside the tunnel and she sees there's 2 little boys in there. One is the really super quiet one, and one is another little boy from the class. The really super quiet one was throwing rocks out of the tunnel at another child who was trying to get into the tunnel. And so the little boy was crying, and the teacher went over there, and her first reaction in her mind was, oh, I need to stop this. You can't throw rocks on the playground, just like many of us would think. Then when she realized who was inside the tunnel throwing the rocks, that it was this little boy that never ever plays with anybody, she stopped herself and she thought, what I wonder what's going on here really, because it's really unlike him, and I wonder what's happening. So she started watching, and she realized that that he had just started playing with another boy, that he actually made a friend and he was playing with somebody in the tunnel for the first time. And she realized from the body language and watching the situation and observing and not stepping in so quickly that this little boy didn't want another boy to come into the tunnel because he didn't want to stop his experience he was having when he was finally finding a friend. So he was communicating, leave us alone, we're playing, and he communicated it like any 2 or 3 year old little boy would do by throwing rocks at him to get away. So the teacher had to make a decision in that moment. She could either shut down the situation, she could bring the boy out of the tunnel and make him stop throwing rocks and apologize, or she could keep the play going, which really felt very important at that moment, and just tell the other little boy what she was thinking. That this child, sorry about my dog, that this child finally made a friend and that we don't really want to change that. So she said it in a way to the little boy. She said, he's having some fun right now. What he's trying to tell you is that he doesn't want to play. And maybe it's not the right way to tell you, but that's what he's trying to tell you. So we're going to walk away and go play somewhere else for now. And we'll talk to him about throwing the rocks at another time. But for now, why don't you go play somewhere else? And I know that sounds like countercultural to what we usually do, but if you think about the situation, what's more important in that moment? Reprimanding a little boy for throwing or letting him finally interact with other children, which was a huge accomplishment. So just think about that when you see an altercation or an issue. Maybe watch a little, get some answers, find out, watch body language, talk to the children, figure out what's happening before you jump in and stop everything, because you could be stopping something very important.
What do you do in a school year to get to know your families? How do you really connect with them? There's a lot of conversations right now about diversity and being sensitive to different cultures. But what I'm finding is that these curriculums that are created are very general. They're really not about diversity. They're about very big general diversity. But real diversity is child to child, family to family in your own classroom each year. You don't need to worry about introducing everyone to everything outside in the world. If you just focus on your group in front of you, you're going to get a hugely dynamic, diverse, um, you're going to get diverse content to work with. You may have a child who was born in Spain. You may have a child who has Chinese parents. There's so many different types of families. Find out who they are. Find out what their cultures are. Just because in China there's something that they do, it doesn't mean your families are doing that. You need to connect to your specific families, find out what they do, find out their customs, their traditions, where they're from, how they grew up. Bring in your own families, and that's your diversity focus for the year. And yes, your curriculum is going to include places around the world, and of course, that's part of your curriculum. But getting your families connected not only brings children outside views of the world, but it also brings your families closer to you and to each other. So I've been a preschool director of a large program for about 12 years now. And we were asked years ago to put together a policy for our discipline. And this is what we came up with. Teach, not punish. That's our discipline policy. Very simple. We're not here to punish children. Do they need to have a consequence at times? Yes, I understand that they do. But we're here to teach children and guide them on how to get through these social emotional challenges. So yes, there may be a consequence. Yes, if we're throwing sand in children's eyes, we might need to walk away from the sandbox and play somewhere else. But before we do that, why don't we go over there and say, and watch the child play and give them some new guidance on another way to do it. And same goes for older children. If they're having an argument, we oftentimes separate them and put them in a separate space or in a timeout, or take away their recess, or make them leave the game they're playing. But that's just punishing, that's not teaching. Where's the teaching? How do we help guide them through the challenge so that next time it happens, they know what to do? If we just stop it and distract and move on, then we're not really doing any of the teaching. And that's what our job is. Okay, I'm not going to lie. Those words make me crazy. When a teacher says to a child, use your words, what are they teaching? Now, if they've already gone through and guided the child with the language and the suggestions, maybe they can say that. But really, when children react physically or emotionally, it's most likely because they don't have the words in that moment, because they would probably use them if they did. So use your words is too general. If two children are having an argument and you go in and you know a child is they're hitting or they're pushing instead of talking, when you say use your words, it doesn't teach them a thing. So maybe walking over to the child and helping guide them through what they could say, or having the two children stop the interaction and let them each have a turn to talk. And then if a child can't come up with what to say, you can give them some guidance on what to say. Give them, model for them. Use your words is way too general. Another very important concept, small, easy, and important. Use this language. Even with preschool children, use this language. First draft, this is your first try. Whenever you put out an experience for them, whether they're painting or drawing, let's talk about how first we're going to do our first try and we're all going to work on it together. And then we're going to do it again and again. Make it a common occurrence in your classroom that there's a first draft or a first try, and that you keep going back and that you keep doing more, so that they don't view that as a failure, just as a routine. Anger is known as a secondary emotion. It's typically a result of something else. So it's frustration or being left out or having feelings hurt, being sad, being hungry, being tired, so many things. But anger is something that's usually a behavioral response or a emotional response to something underneath it. So it's similar to a symptom, as I said before, where they're hitting or kicking or punching. Sometimes children don't get physical when they're angry, but that anger is usually something else. So when you see anger, dig deeper. I once attended a conference on mindfulness, that big buzzword mindfulness. But one of the things that the person said who was teaching the class, which always stuck with me, is to give children a visual for emotions and feelings. Because we all feel like these feelings and emotions we have are going to last forever. And it's hard to get hold of ourselves when we have a very strong emotion in the moment, but they're going to pass. And so one of the things that we did once in this class was we laid down, we were outside or we were watching a video, I don't remember, and we were talking about the clouds passing and giving children the visual that clouds pass and so do feelings. And to let them recognize that sometimes you have to ride them out and sometimes you have to wait a little and take a deep breath and take a walk, but they do pass just like the clouds. I thought that was a great way to visualize it. It even helps me think about it sometimes. Okay, this feeling's going to pass. So just, ride it out. And that's a very, very important skill for a child to recognize. How do you do this? How do you teach and model for children conflict resolution in the classroom? How do you get them from needing you to help them manage it to doing it on their own? So there's a lot of different techniques, and again, this is a whole class all by itself. But one classroom I saw I was very interesting. They were 4 and 5 year olds, but I think this could be accommodated at all different ages. And when the children had a conflict, and the teacher said, you need to go work it out. The box is over there. And the 4-year-olds went over, they took out a box, and in the box there were cards, and the cards had pictures of a timer, pictures of sharing, pictures of taking turns, so many different ideas and visuals. And the children knew that the teacher just said, go over to the box, and that's all she needed to do. They went over, they opened the box, they took out all the cards, and they decided what card they were going to use, and they decided to share. And it was beautiful, it was quick, and that conflict that could have grown to be something much bigger was resolved, and it was resolved independently. How can you model conflict resolution and then move it eventually off of the adult to the children so that they can manage it independently, which of course is our goal? Adaptability is simply children having the skill to adapt their behavior or their responses to the environment that they're in. What we do at school versus what we do at home, what we do at grandma's versus what we do at the grocery store, and recognizing that it's really good to have conversations in advance with children before they go to a new space so that they understand what's expected of them in a new environment. Most children have a natural ability to figure this out, but some children really need the support. So I have a very best friend, and her name is Annie. And Annie is a fabulous parent, and I've always watched her parent and thought to myself, wow, she really is awesome. And so there's something that she does that I always remembered and I always share with my classes when we talk about this topic. So adaptability, we decided, right, is that you're in an environment and that you are aware of what's around you and you adjust yourself to fit in. And a lot of children can do this and they figure it out. Some children have a little bit harder time. They're just themselves wherever they are, and they have to be kind of modeled or help guide or guided through a new environment. So my friend Ann's son Sam had a really hard time with this. Like he had a big personality, some challenges that have kind of grew over the years, and it didn't matter where he was. If he was going to have a tantrum, it was going to be wherever he was going to be. If he was going to run away or touch things or break things, it was going to be wherever he was going to be. So one of the things that Annie used to always do, which was again so simple but so effective, is she would always pull him aside when they were somewhere, especially if he started getting a little bit out of control, and he would say stop. She would say stop, take a deep breath, and look around. She did that all the time. Stop, take a deep breath, and look around. And she would always do it in private. She never ever reprimanded her children in front of other people, which I thought was so amazing and definitely what we should be thinking about in the classroom so we don't embarrass them. But so she would pull him aside or whisper in his ear, stop, take a deep breath, and look around. And he would do that. And he would notice that nobody else was jumping up and down, or nobody else was screaming, or nobody else was loud. And he would regulate himself based on what he saw. She'd help him. It was not an easy fix, but it really made a big difference. And it was so simple. Stop, take a deep breath, and look around, and very quietly. Changes are very hard for children, for some children. We read chapters long ago. Back, we read The Orchid and the Dandelion, and I think a lot about the orchid in this situation. If you haven't read that article, go back and read it. The orchid is the more sensitive child. Dandelions kind of can go with the flow. You can switch places, you can change your plans, something can be closed and you have to go somewhere else and it's no problem. And then there's the orchid who really really is sensitive to change, to their environment, gets upset very easily, gets emotional, gets thrown off, gets anxious. So if you think about changes, how can we help children adapt to changes? um, some things are just best practice all around. In your classroom, having a visual schedule. In preschool classrooms, I highly recommend like a 5 by 7 or even an 8 by 10 visual picture, either a cartoony Google image kind of graphic or something that's actually in your school. So what I always do in my classrooms is when I make my schedule, I actually take pictures of what's in my current environment. So if it's playground time, if it's snack time, if it's music time, I take pictures of the person or the space, the actual in actuality, so that when I hang up my big square, I put it on cardstock, I laminate it, I put Velcro on it, and or magnets wherever I am, and I hang it up for the year. And it's actually photos of where we are living in our space. But with older children, you can also use images of Google Images. You can put the words with it so that you're working on literacy and showing children what's going to happen all day. Because as same as us, if you walked into a class and you knew you were going to be there for 8 hours and you had no idea what your agenda was for the day, you would really, that would make you anxious. You kind of need to know what's going to happen. And so for children, number one, across the board, they should always have a visual schedule or a written one, depending on the age. Doesn't matter what age they are. Through college, I would give you a visual schedule. I mean, I would give you a written schedule. So you need to kind of know what it is that you're walking into. And then also there's something called a social story. There's so many ways you can help children work on changes. You can walk through things in advance. You can have, I have children with families who tell me their children are very sensitive to change. I'll have them come up in the summer, walk around the building, check out the playground, take a peek at their classroom, even if it's not ready yet. And I have to say, I know that we're off in the summer, and I know that, it's our time. But if you know a very sensitive child is coming into your classroom, and you even agree just to FaceTime a couple times in the summer, the difference for you starting off will be tremendous for both of you. So thinking about, adding in some of those comforts. Um, but a social story is another great idea. A social story is a book. Some of you probably have heard of this already, but it's a book that you make. So yes, there's tons of books out there on change. You can read a book about starting school, going to camp, moving to a new house. There's reading books to children is just magical. And so that's of course a great idea. But for the more sensitive child, a social story is really, really effective. So making a story, again, using images, photos, Google Images, whatever you want to make a book that specifically outlines the change that child is going to have. So say a child's going to move to a new house. Um, taking pictures of their old bedroom and showing and talking with you can talk to their families about doing these things. Taking pictures of their old bedrooms and talking about how it's hard to leave things and it's going to be different. And what does it mean when things are different? And then maybe going over to the new house and taking pictures of the new house and the new yard and the new kitchen and the new bedrooms and showing them what's going to happen. Transitioning children to school. So maybe taking pictures of the school bus, taking pictures of the front of the school building, taking pictures inside the school, taking pictures of the teacher. I mean, there's a lot of things that you can do. Put it in a little book, and then the family can read the book to the child over and over and over again until they feel more comfortable with what's going to happen. So it's basically a children's book in general or a children's book specifically made for that child. So those are just some ideas for helping children through changes. What do you do to help your children transition throughout the day? What rituals do you use? Again, I'm a preschool person, so I had bubbles in between transitions. I had bells that I've used. We've blinked lights. We've had songs. Setting up something that's a ritual. And even with older children, even if it means that they have a 5-minute warning, there's a timer, the verbal warning, making sure you're giving them time to wind down before it's finished. Thinking about what you do that's always there for helping children to transition through. I would love to share ideas, so I may post this on the chat so that people can share the different things that they do for routines. Okay, so now it's time to put it all together. Sorry. So I would like you to send me a Word document. I'd like you to pick 5 action items that from the course that you're going to take with you, write it down, take with you into the fall, and make it happen. So pick 5 action items, put it into a Word document, and with a little explanation under each one on how you're going to make that happen. So basically, it's the things that stood out to you the most, something you want to change, a change that you want to make, something new you want to do. Pick 5 of them. Underneath each one, just a few sentences of how you're going to make that happen, and then submit it to me as your last assignment. Thank you so much.